Hi, welcome back to the Inhabitants Podcast. This is Season 1, Episode 3, and the topic today is the importance of environment. I'm joined today with my co-podcasters, Nicholas Subero and David Stewart. Welcome, guys. How are you feeling today?
Well, I'm good.
Alright, and you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Alright, okay. So, let's get right into it. And what would be your definition of an environment?
Well, today, for me, the focus is on social environment. That would have to deal with whether it's your home, your workplace, the place that you go to relax, or just a sports club, whether it's just kicking it with a few friends. For me, that's what I would class as social environment.
What about you, Nick?
Environment in general are described or defined as a place that you inhabit. And so it could be some place that you inhabit mentally, some place that you inhabit physically. So yeah, the environment is just a place that you exist in for me.
Okay, I think I could agree with both of your definitions.
All right.
And also to the fact that environment is extremely influential in who we are or would become as a person.
Right.
And in everything in life, there are negative factors, positive factors,
Right.
and each influence can definitely form who you are as a person.
Right.
I think especially where the environment of school, where we all met each other, we probably didn't think that then, but now we could definitely realize that was such a positive environment.
Yeah.
And that from the teachers to the curriculum to even the structure itself, the way they would take care of how the school itself would look. Looking back now, that would really have helped us, because if we were in a dirty environment or that would have us feeling off, we probably wouldn't have been able to thrive as much.
Right.
Even like AC, having all access to all those computers,
All the resources, definitely.
all the resources really crafted us as who we are today.
Right.
And we're sitting having this conversation. I really think that environment really helped, and I'll class that as a healthy environment.
Right. Because there's something that I read recently, and it's a book on psychology. The name of it is Quiet by Susan Cain. And she was saying that many of us, well, all of us are born with temperament, but it's our environment that shapes our personality, And for me, that has stuck with me, because it shows that whether you're an introvert, a sensitive person, an extrovert, there are different traits that you pick up along the way based on your various environments.
Right.
It can determine whether you become a hero or a villain, And for me, that's super important to focus on as well.
Yeah, I think testimony to support what you're saying and what she would have written in the book is the fact that if you look back on your life, you could see that there are different environments that you would have been a part of,
Right.
and your behavior and personality and thoughts would have been different for each one of those
Right.
environments.
That's
That
true.
primary school me wasn't the same as secondary school me,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think especially certain skills that you would have developed. For
Right.
example, creativity. I think for the three of us, we could pinpoint the music group that we had as something that would propel our creativity.
For sure.
And even now, I think that any product of creativity could be drawn back to that point where we were just bored in class and we had a pen in our hand and we decided to recite, whatever song was hot at the point in time, Duffel Bag Boy,
Right.
whatever the case was. We could pinpoint it back to the environment and having people with the same energies around us to say, okay, that's why I developed my creativity. You're an actor. You could say, as a result of being in Trinity, I was in theatre arts.
Right.
I met this person. I developed this skill. I was playing football every single day, probably multiple times a day. Right? Could develop our fitness, how we have decided to be fit right now.
Yeah.
Our level of, all right, I need to execute this how much ever times a week, because we did it so much in a certain environment. So I think we could now discuss the factors around the healthy environment, because that was a specific example of school. And for me, school was a place where I could have expressed myself a lot more than if I was home.
Right.
Because I was like on a strict schedule at home for academic excellence. So I never really went over to friends' homes to lime or play or anything like that. Far less for neighbors. That was rare. No TV during the week. You have your work to do, you get your work done.
Right.
And then Saturday was Sabbath for me, so I really looked at television Saturday night and Sunday, and then that was it. I would see you sneaky in a few views if your parents didn't come home. And even now, with FIFA that we play together now, that started back in school. So I think the factors to a healthy environment is a place where you could express yourself, number one, where you have like-minded people around you that could support you to grow. Do you have any additions to that?
Yeah, I do actually. For me, I think that having an environment like that can also impact you psychologically. Because for me, a lot of people didn't know, not even you all, but the music that we would have created at that point got me through a lot of my depression as a child, as a teenager. And playing sports allowed me to put that pent-up energy into something else,
Right.
you know? So going forward, yeah.
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 I think since Trinity colleges in particular would be the common establishment for us, it's the perfect example of a healthy environment, especially as a child, as a teen. I mean, teenagers, but still children. There are lots of things that we don't realize in the moment are for our benefit, and that might make us not realize how healthy of an environment it is. Because when you think back now on how, like you're mentioning, playing football all the time would have helped to develop a certain discipline and an interest in being fit and all these different things. When you look back on our time in Trinity colleges, we wanted to play football all the time, and there would have been teachers, deans, principals who would stop that because it's like you have to do schoolwork at some point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they fostered some of that. Like, we spent a lot of time beating on desks and coming up with rap lyrics in the classroom, which was at sometimes disruptive.
Right.
But at the same time, that same establishment held competitions and had a stage and allowed us to perform together for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, my first time performing a rap song on stage was in that school auditorium.
Yeah.
The same school that would tell you, well, you can't perform right now because you're in class, you know?
Right.
So there were certain things inside that establishment that helped us understand that a healthy environment is one that has balance.
Yeah.
There's moderation to everything.
Definitely.
I think that lends to being holistic and also having a flexible environment.
Yeah.
Because we could have been doing our raps and stuff in class, and it could have been nipped in the bud by the supervisors or teachers or whatever the case is, and it could have died there. But they encourage us, okay, clearly there's something y'all would be good at, and others, so let's create a competition.
Create the avenue.
Create the avenue for expression.
Right.
Whereas if you mirror it with home, and you're doing that in some homes, that is just cut out right immediately. You know, you're not in America, you're in Trinidad, you're not going to get anywhere with that.
Come on.
And if there's no flexibility, then that would have just died. Your creativity could have died as well.
Right.
And then essentially who you are as a person.
Right.
So definitely, even in healthy environments, there can also exist unhealthy environments.
Yeah,
And
that's
factors that would definitely affect your depression, your belief in yourself, and even your dreams. Because if, for example, you're acting, Nick,
Right.
you were in an environment in school that would have fostered that, like a direct result out of theatre arts and Mr. Smart or theatre arts teacher and all those stuff, right? And you pushed on with that. But then had you gone home and you're in an environment where you're constantly being told you could never do this, you could never do that, and you have stuff on your shoulders that takes away from you fostering your talent, you probably wouldn't have been where you are today. And I think even if that existed, we as persons have to take responsibility to make our environment flexible.
Fair.
So, for example, having pressures from home on healthy environment, for example, but you're having the healthy environment in school, you're only in school for a number of hours. The next half of the day is home. So you may then go to extracurricular activity to get out of that environment, or block yourself out of hearing certain things through meditation or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think we also have to take accountability for our environment. And even if you can identify unhealthy things that exist, we need to create a counterbalance,
Right.
because our personal development after our spirituality is the next top priority.
It all ties into each other. But what I would like to ask though, we can say these things as adults, right?
As
But what
thinking
about
that
children?
children?
Children whose lives are almost dictated by the adults around them. What advice can we give to them, or the parents who raise them, or the guardians who are responsible for their upbringing? Because I mean, our decisions as adults affect the children within our lives, you know, and we may not see it, nor we may think that we are giving them what's best for them, you know, but at the end of the day, we can be creating a healthy or an unhealthy environment. So what do you all think about that?
I think that the new age parents or new age adults,
Right.
they understand how they work. I think as time passes, it improves.
Right.
Because from our grandparents to our parents was a certain way, probably very strict. From our parents to us, it probably eased up a bit. But we could still identify certain parts that we would like to now improve on when we have children. So I think just being aware and doing things
Right.
with intent. So, for example, I may be a footballer and I may have a son or a
Right.
daughter and want them to be a footballer as well.
Right.
And from the minute they're born, they're in football camps, they're in football school team, for example. But I think that the new age parents, most of them, give that child space to be, to learn, to foster different things. So I think that I love actionable steps. So through a podcast like this, someone
Right.
who may be to be parent can actually think about that
Right.
and intently say, okay, I'm going to allow this child to influence their own environment.
Exactly.
You understand?
Makes sense, yeah.
I'm not going to create the environment to a T and then
Right.
say fit in that.
And
Right.
that's something I want to add on.
Yeah.
You want to go? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
because you were saying the new age parents, and whilst that phrase might actually be correct, at the end of the day, those parents are us now. Like, we're the adults of this new age.
Yeah.
We're the ones who are raising these children, right? And I think a very important thing to note is the importance of, as an adult, being open to what the world environment is at the point in time. So as you were mentioning, like for grandparents, technology wasn't as big a deal. The
Right.
world wasn't in communication with each other as it is now. So there were certain ideals that were very clique-like, very village-like, that was very small-minded. So everybody from a particular area thought a particular way, and you'd be weird if you thought outside of that. So they raised you to fit within this bracket. And then
Right.
our parents at that point in time were growing up in a world that was different from their grandparents. So
Right.
they were raised differently. And they tried to raise us the way that they were raised. But by the time they were adults, the world changed again.
Yeah.
And so we lived in a particular type of world as children. Because I think about it all the time with my nieces and nephews. Like, they don't go outside to play. They don't engage in like a lot of the physical and sometimes they don't even
devices.
want to do the physical activities that we were dying to do. And
Right.
sometimes it kind of irks you, and you're like, just I want to take all of their devices and send them outside to play. But
Yeah.
that's, in my head, that's doing them some good physical activity, fresh air, whatever. But that's not where their world is right now. That's not where their interests lie. For all we know,
Right.
I'm taking away a device from the next employee or the next owner of the biggest tech company in the world or something, you know?
Yeah.
That's where their interest lies. So as adults, I feel like it's very important for us to be open to where the world is now and where it could possibly be heading, so that, as you're saying, the children can influence their own
Right.
environment and really thrive in what the world is now and not what it used to be for us, because
Right.
that time has gone.
But with that though, what I would think though is that there needs to be a balance, because
For sure.
us allowing things to go in that direction could lead to a lot of cultural erasure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a sense, we are responsible for finding ways to introduce them to the things that would have benefited us, because
Right.
at the same time, these devices can limit imagination,
Right.
and the things that we would have done, the more hands-on things, would have benefited us now. So what we need to do is find ways to communicate that to them in ways that they would
You
understand.
would understand, yeah.
You know, okay, for instance, right? Let me give you an example. That generation that's now coming up, the children of today, they are obsessed with technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if there's some way where we go to, let's say, YouTube and show them videos of things that we would have done as kids, and from there suggest, let's do it together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's spend some time doing this together, not just us telling them to go outside to do that, but we engage with them. You know, that encourages them. You know, so what I think is, as parents or as guardians, uncles, aunties, what we need to do is understand that they are individuals, encourage individuality, and at the same time find ways to speak to them in their language.
Yeah.
Understand that children they are just as important as adults, and their feelings and their characteristics, their personalities are just as important.
I would say
You know?
even more, because they're coming next.
Yeah.
So I think that there is definitely a balance between a parent's responsibility and lending trust to the child
Right.
themselves, because you would know certain things as a parent from your experience,
Mm-hmm.
but then that is based off your timeline,
Right.
like you mentioned.
Right.
And they are coming up in a whole new timeline. So, for example, outdoor activities versus digital age.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have parental responsibility, right, in terms of instilling the example that you just mentioned, but then also leave space to trust that child to grow, to become their own person in whatever avenues they need to, but still have an open eye, because they could go down certain avenues that could be extremely destructive to them. But still, leave some room, leave some space to trust that child. Because before, I could attest to this, it could have been, and I'm sure you two can as well, extremely difficult to just communicate with your parents.
Right.
To just say,
definitely.
this is how I feel.
Right.
And it's like, you feel like, okay, your feelings clear, it don't matter, I'm the adult, you're the child,
Right.
just take it easy. And I think now, communication is extremely important at whatever age the child may be.
Yeah.
A child could be 3, 4, 1. Once they begin to speak, even before speaking, there's body language.
Yeah.
So as adults, even though you are an adult, you should be able to take that into consideration, actually put some thought into it, take your parental responsibility into account, and trust in that child, and merge that to then make a decision and say, okay, I heard what you said, I understand, I suggest XYZ. What do you suggest?
Mm-hmm.
And encourage conversation.
Yeah.
And then I think that could be a very healthy environment that could actually convert from being an unhealthy one by just intention.
Not just that, but what we fail to realize is that they can also influence us. You know,
That's what I meant. That's
Yeah.
that's the type of stuff I meant by them. They are of the world that is now. Like, have you ever noticed that sometimes you don't even have to give instructions to children when you hand them certain technological devices?
Right.
They get it. Meanwhile, there are some devices we have to look at the little manual first to figure out what's going on. Not
Yeah.
because we're dumb, but because this is new.
Right.
And it's what they exist in. So it's not so much new to them anymore. And to piggyback on what you were saying about adults having lived a particular life and having experience, I think what I neglected to say in my speech before was that experience and that time and having lived and experienced your own vision of childhood is what you can use to guide the children coming up, because it's your responsibility as the adult, as the parent, to keep them safe and to nurture them. So I'm not saying that parenthood should be a democracy, because let's face it, there are certain things that you can't just give a child control over, because that's a child.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not a dictatorship.
Right.
Like, you know, It can't be, because that leaves room for resentment, that leaves room for deliberate rebellion, all of those different things, and you don't want that.
So I think in that vein, when I meant the balance, I meant it as a slider. So there's certain instances where you have to slide that over to parental responsibility, probably even to the extreme, and say, this is not going to happen in this house.
Right.
And then you can slide it over to a side of trust and say, okay, this is making me feel uncomfortable, but I think I can trust you in this instance. I could trust your communication. I could trust what you're saying by wanting to do this. And then it's something that could just keep moving, but not steadfast.
Like he was saying, you have to at least be open enough to do it with them, even.
Yeah.
For example, there are lots of children on sites like YouTube and TikTok and all these different things where they basically have their own vlogs and whatnot. Like, if being online is something that scares certain adults from whatever experiences they would have had before, like your child could be open to things like bullying, could be open to predators online or whatever. Right. Instead of saying something like, nah, my children are never going to be online, how about being online with the child? How about monitoring them while they're online, different things, you know? So that you don't just have to put all your trust in them, you can also be there to guide them and just be open enough to allow them to express themselves. You know?
So I think that was, we really went deep into that.
We did.
But I think it's important because it definitely, as a child, leads into us as adults right now having this discussion.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned us as adults learning from the children, but we as adults also need to be aware of our environments that we foster with other adults, not just as a parent, for our kids or people that we may feel responsible for in society. And definitely after school, we all of us went our separate ways. Life brought us back together, and for me personally, I did remember how healthy our friendship was and how healthy that environment was. Because bringing it back to where we are now, a lot of good has come from us in each other's environments. Like, for example, how we motivate each other, how we hold each other accountable, how we would combine our strengths to help each other's weaknesses, how we would always learn from each other. So I think that we as adults on the whole should be extremely careful about the environment. We may be so focused on making money, surviving, because after you pass a certain age, it's your responsibility now. So we may actually be putting ourselves in a work environment that can be extremely unhealthy for us, just to make the coin, just to survive. And what do we prioritize? Making a certain amount of money, or having a healthy environment, making less, for example, because we could actually be shortening our life through instances of depression, feeling like we don't belong. By, for example, working in a place or being around a certain group of friends that would actually be draining our energies, but we feel a strong sense of belonging and that we want to be there. So I think as adults, we need to be extremely cautious of our environments as well, because just as how it affects the children, it can affect us.
Right. We have this tendency to allow life to dictate where we go, in a sense, or environment or society, as they may say, where we make unconscious decisions. We just go with the flow then. So an opportunity may present itself through a job or a position in a club or something like that, and that we just take it up without any consideration of how it impacts us, what sort of environment it actually is, And for me, I'm a firm and strong believer of conscious decisions, saying yes or no based on what something means to me or how it impacts me. So if I'm in a position where there's an opening for a job that pays me a lot of money, but I'm aware that, okay, I'm going to have to be working 10 hours a day, and that creates an environment that is extremely stressful for me, and I'm not going to allow myself to engage in the things that mean a lot to me, the things that I'm passionate about, then I'm sacrificing the things that are actually important to me just for money. Now, that for me is creating a terrible environment for myself.
Right. Because you're being self-aware.
Right.
You know what is important to you and what could threaten that.
Right.
And you make a decision based on the data that's presented to you.
Right. So even if the job site is a healthy one where I have the best co-workers, I have the best manager, there's the opportunity for me to probably rest or reflect within the job site and things like that. I need to consider what this means to me. How does this impact me? How does this decision impact the other aspects of my life? Is it healthy or is it unhealthy for me? So am I the one contributing to the negative environment in my life?
Yeah. And that is just through intentional assessment.
Right.
Because we may now, and please, for our listeners, please don't think that we're saying this is something future forward where you're going into an environment. Because as of right now, you exist in many different environments.
Sure.
Yeah. So you can start right now and assess and say, okay, how do I feel when I'm with this person? How do I feel when I'm in this environment? How do I feel when I go here every week to engage in this activity? And once you make those assessments and you have your answers,
right,
then you could tell yourself, okay, should I continue? Should I not? What can I do?
However, like right now, we have to acknowledge that we are speaking from a very privileged pointer. Because
right,
you have just given that beautiful example, but you're 26, not married, don't have children, and I believe you live at home, so you're not paying rent right now, right? It's like all of those things fit the example that you were giving, that you don't have to take a job that pays a certain amount and exist in an uncomfortable or unhealthy environment because you have to survive, you know? So we're speaking from a perspective where we already exist in a semi-comfortable spot, but how would the listener who's hearing this for the first time, or even if it's not for the first time, but they currently exist in an environment where they have people who are depending on them financially, or
right,
they themselves have debt, or they have certain bills to pay, and they currently exist in an environment where he or she has no choice but to work that 10, 12-hour job where they're not getting the best type of environment, but they are getting what they need to make it to next Friday or to make it to the end of the month.
Right.
Like, what advice do we have for them? Because what we just gave is from a very specific perspective in life.
I would say do what you could in this moment to contribute positively to that environment, make it work as much as you can, but do not settle. Because at the same time, you can have a secure job, as they would say, quote unquote, secure job that's making you unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you can hold that job down and send out resumes. You know, you can still be seeking for better. You can still seek better while you're within that position. So I'm not telling you leave your job. I'm not telling you stay at home until you find that perfect job. But at the end of the day, you have the power to attract more into your life and not settle. You know,
I think for those people who feel the way you described, Nick, my first step, way before those steps that you mentioned, would be conscious. Sit, assess how you feel, like I just said previously, in these environments, whether you have a choice or not. Some people, as you said, we are speaking from probably a very privileged standpoint. Some people, they are born into certain environments, they are in certain situations, and that's just how it is. And they may feel stuck. I'm saying start by being conscious. So if you're listening to this and you're seeing the importance of environments, just sit and assess every environment that you are in. Whether you're there because you have to be or not, how does it make you feel? Ask yourself these questions. And at the end, you should always reach to a point to say, do I want to be here or do I desire not to be here?
Right.
Once you answer that question, then you should be able to tell yourself, okay, I do not want to be here, but I have to be here right now. Step number 2, what can I do to get out of here and put myself in a better position, a better environment, and still let the purpose of me being in this environment still exist. Right. So, for example, a job. I need to provide for my dependents. I need somewhere to live. I hate this job. It's terrible for me. I'm depressed. I'm stressed. Okay, let's go into step number 2. I need a new job. Preferably paying equal or more. If I can check that category and then check healthier environments, let me continuously seek that out.
Right.
And that applies to your job, wherever you have
Exactly.
extracurricular activities, anything like that. I think that would be my actionable steps to anyone.
Right.
First, step 1, be conscious. Step 2, assess your situation, answer those questions. And then step 3, apply those steps to getting that done. And I would like to now revert to our first episode, which is the power of just getting started. Listen to that to apply these steps. Because we could say, okay, all right, yeah, those guys making sense. And then you're back to the grind the next day.
Right.
And you totally forget that this point that could have been the turning point in your entire life just by being conscious. So to answer your question, I think that would be actionable steps for those who think they're in situations where they can't help.
Right.
Just being conscious and self-aware is the first step. And soon enough, you will see yourself in a position where you actually feel like you're in a healthy environment and that your personality grows, you feel better, and you would be able to look back and pinpoint to the exact point where you decided, I am going to be intentional right now.